Check one, check two. All right, it's working. Good afternoon, everyone. Delighted to be here, and welcome to the almost last session. I think everyone's probably ready to have a little happy hour right after. For anyone who wants to grab a cup of coffee or tea and masala chai, it's right there. That's the best part about being at an Indian event. You get some masala chai. While we've got folks actually getting mic'd up for the next session, just from our show of hands, how many VCs in the house? All right, very good. How many startups in the house? Very nice. And how many medtech, biotech, large company elements? All right. How about academia? All right. Health providers, payers? All right, very cool. The good news is I see a strong distribution of all those elements, and it's going to be wonderful to be able to share with you the next panel. So what we're going to talk about is health sovereignty and AI, wearables, and health data. With me joining this afternoon is going to be Stephanie from Amazon. We have Sheep from Aura, Cody from Dermasensor, David from Google. If you guys want to come on in up on the stage, come on over. All right, welcome. Please. Come on over. Don't be shy. And we have Dr. Meenal from Sutter Health. Sit wherever you guys like. I like this distribution, even though it wasn't intended. Man, woman, man, woman. All right, good. Fabulous. So before we get started, just wanted to talk about the fact that we actually have device makers and data platforms all in the room over here. And what we're going to discuss is where the stack in AI has the most durable value right now versus where there's just maybe some promise off, if you will. In my excitement of being up here, I did not manage to introduce myself. So my name is Neeta Mhatre, and I'm working for Intuitive Surgical. I had the pleasure and honor of having my fingerprints on 50% of the robots that have been launched at Intuitive. So Da Vinci, maker of the Da Vinci robots, and thank you. It's usually the team that does the work. We just stand here representing it. So really, it's a pleasure. And more recently, I'm now responsible for Asia commercial operations and China strategy. So I'm going to kick this off by first asking Stephanie, and as my panelists will do is, as I ask them a question, they're going to introduce themselves at that point and just share a little bit about themselves. Okay? So Stephanie, from your perspective, who truly owns the health data that's generated on your platforms? Is it the user, the device maker, or you as a data company, since you're working on it?
So my name is Stephanie Boucheri. I work at Amazon at Lab 126 in emerging tech. I'm also an investor and a strategic advisor, and I think that the topic of data is truly an important one. At the end of the day, however, the data belongs to you. All of you sitting here in the audience, my esteemed colleagues up here on the stage with me, I know that Grish and the gentleman, Dr. Osborne, were talking about data as a commodity, but data makes up about 96% of the world's largest, trillion-dollar cap companies, and it's not tangible. So how we protect it, how we think about it, especially in health and regulated arenas, is incredibly important. At Amazon, I have to say, I'm speaking from my own personal perspective, but I feel like we've been really responsible. One medical, everything is HIPAA compliant. At Amazon Pharmacy, everything is HIPAA compliant. PHI is very, very regarded, protected, and it's all siloed from the rest of the platforms in terms of retail and everything else. So I will give Amazon that commitment.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. David, from your perspective, how do you prevent healthcare data becoming another input to ad targeting or credit scoring or using the data in an indirect manner, like we are usually feeling like we are the products somehow?
Thank you for the question. So my name is David White. I work with Google for Startups. Been there about 7 years since Google bought the startup that I was with. Prior to that, I spent 20 years building and scaling startups up and down Silicon Valley, more than half of which spent in healthcare. A lot of time in pharmacy, specialty pharmacy, and hospital telepharmacy. I think one of the things I want to echo is data fundamentally is and should be the property of the individual. Where we see companies that don't necessarily play nice, we don't want to do business with them. We put tremendous safeguards in place in order to make sure that those data boundaries are respected. Now, one of the things about Google is when you stand on the outside and you look at Google, you think there's one great big shiny fortress. From the inside, it's actually thousands of tiny little fiefdoms. So I can't speak to what Android does or Play Store or Fitbit. My area is within cloud. And within cloud, by and large, what we create are tools and platforms for you to build applications on top of. And so the tools that we give you to use are HIPAA compliant or HIPAA ready. What you do with them, we don't necessarily have control over. So you as application creators, as hardware vendors, as interfaces with your customer population, need to do the right thing, need to respect those boundaries, need to respect those privacy rules. We will make it possible for you to do that. The onus is on you, but ultimately it's on the consumer. And the consumer absolutely has the right to manage their own data, and they need to have the tools in order to do that in an informed way.
That's fair. And I think one of the things when you talk about privacy data and HIPAA compliance, right? So there's two levels of responsibility. HIPAA compliance is where you actually have hospitals that have the private data, that the hospitals need to ensure that that's not leaked out. From a company's perspective, any data that comes into you, you also have to make sure that you don't actually have leakages and elements of that. So I think both of them are very valid. Let me move on to Dr. Mino. You are actually building something inside of Sutter Home. Tell us a little bit about, what are the challenges that you face in bringing in innovation from a healthcare system perspective?
Hello everyone, I'm Minal Panashali. I'm a neurologist at Palo Alto Medical Foundation in San Carlos, and I'm also a researcher. I am doing research in Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease currently. So what I'm building within Sutter Health and Palo Alto Medical Foundation is a platform, digital platform, where we can use the data that's collected passively, continuously, and objective data from all the wearables, and apply it to see how we can use it for clinical decision making as a patient, as a doctor for my patients, how I can use those clinical insights to make better decisions in terms of treatment or monitoring progression of the disease. So right now we started with piloting in the Parkinson's disease space, but in our roadmap we do plan to expand into other neurological conditions like dementia, stroke, multiple sclerosis, and so on. Right now, what's happening, what I see is that there's a tech world. They're so good in getting all the data, and the technology right now is there where we get high fidelity, high quality data that's coming in. And the tech world is like, you guys are really good at experts of analyzing it, having these amazing AI models to do these analytics and scale it with ability. And on the other silo is the healthcare system, where we don't have much infrastructure that's available to analyze this data. But we are close to the patients. And as clinicians, we have good insights. And we know these are the clinical outcomes that we need to focus on. Or these are the longitudinal outcomes, or this is what the real world data or the progression of a disease looks like. And currently, they both are kind of in a siloed, working independently, and I'm trying to bridge that gap so that we can work together so that the clinicians can make better decisions for their patients based on the data rather than what data we get in a half an hour or 1 hour visit episodically when we see patients. Now, the challenges, and from a healthcare standpoint, I would probably categorize in 3 big categories. The first one is the technology itself, not having the infrastructure created as tech world has within the healthcare system. So we have to start building that infrastructure to create those pipelines to get the data in our system. We also have realized that technology is great, but technology adoption is another big issue that we need to address. And that's why we need to be thoughtful up front when we are designing these systems. How do we align technology with the clinical world, whether it's clinical relevance or clinical workflows? How is this technology going to be integrated in the workflow for clinicians? For example, can it be available at point of care when the clinician is actually seeing the patient, which is, it needs to be integrated within electronic medical records, for example. And that brings me to the second issue in terms of regulation. And the regulation is HIPAA is one of them because healthcare institutions are considered as trusted stewards of healthcare data by our patients. So we have that responsibility towards our patients, and we have to be responsible with their privacy, with their security of the data, and so on. And when all these wearable data comes in, there's a lot of ambiguity at multiple fronts when it comes to data. Is this data considered as a general personal use data, or is it a healthcare data? And if we are bringing all this data into Epic, even if it is considered as a general consumer level data, then once it comes into Epic, does it become a healthcare data? And we're subject to same standards. So there's a lot of ambiguity there and no clear guidelines on that. The second ambiguity or other areas pertain to ethical uses of data, like data transparency, for example, or consenting. They should know what they're signing up for, but they're consenting to give their data to a device company or a wearable. Data portability, data tokenization or commercialization, and health equity, like people who don't have access to the wearables, are they left behind? So from a healthcare standpoint, as in from the other side, we have to think about all these, and we need to work together with our technology partner to create a framework about how to create a patient-centered, ethical stewardship framework for our patients or for the data that's coming up. So that's another big challenge. I wouldn't say challenge, but this is what I'm kind of trying to navigate this area. And I don't have clear answers or guidelines on it, and I don't think they exist. And if they exist, please let me know. And then the third one is a third big category of challenges is the finance part. So one is really what is the ROI? But healthcare, I'm very incredibly lucky to be at Sutter Health, who is at forefront of innovation, especially when it comes to clinicians, supporting all my efforts. But as a healthcare institution, it's like, what's the ROI? Is there any policy from insurers or CMS as to what the reimbursement would be for using this data in the clinical practice? What the liability would be either? Who's liable? Is it the software engineer who wrote the code, or who would be liable if this is wrong, or is it the doctor, and so on? And then, of course, the funding and the speed by which we can go in healthcare, which is a highly regulated industry per se. So that we don't have that advantage of having the speed that the technology companies can go. And I think these are the gaps that I am seeing as I'm charting my way through this area. And I think that there needs to be a great partnership between technology and healthcare systems in this area.
Anyone on the panel wanting to share any advice on what's working at your end?
I'm curious, how are you navigating interoperability issues between the wearable that you're creating and the data that's being generated by that and Epic? Because I feel like a lot of founders that I work with that are trying to partner with healthcare systems are constantly coming up against this interoperability challenge. And also the data that they're collecting and then presenting to the healthcare systems, oftentimes clinicians either don't value or don't look at, or they don't necessarily have the education or background on how to translate that data.
Correct. That's a really good question, and thank you for that question. So there are a couple of ways. So right now, when we are piloting our Parkinson's disease platform, we are doing it under an IRB-approved research protocol. So it's research because we need to do more data modeling and validation. And healthcare systems, including clinicians, are trained to do evidence-based medicine. We need validation studies. We need enough evidence. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is how we present the data. So I'm spending so much time with my developer and my teams to create different wireframes and getting feedback initially in this pilot project from other neurologists. Like, what do you think if I can present this data on date to you? Will that help you make treatment decisions for Parkinson's patients differently? So getting that early feedback and being thoughtful about which are the clinical outcomes you want to focus on, what's important for the clinicians and for the patients. So those are the few things that come to my mind. And again, the architecture part, we are navigating. We have to get review approvals from privacy and security, and get every time we do any architectural change in the pipeline, we have to, and that's what slows us down. So that's where we don't have the speed, and also because of that, we weren't a lot of funding in that process. So it's a little expensive. It is slow, and maybe there are better ways of doing things. But those are the things that we navigate in a large healthcare system, because ultimately patients, we are the stewards of patient data, and we need to be responsible for it. So
I think one of the key things, as everyone realizes, right? I think we're sitting in a high-tech, conference, and we're sitting in the healthcare med tech. Each one of us is a patient, and the most important thing for us is to ensure that the providers that are getting us the devices and ensuring the safety of that. And I think from a regulated industry perspective, that's the number one thing, patient safety. Patients are always first to us. And so I think the length of time sometimes is the right thing to do as long as you're focusing on the safety of the patients, if you will. One aspect I'll just mention to you from a manufacturer perspective, when we are looking to actually launch products, we look at the framework of something called DBF. D is desirability, which means that is this something that the customers actually want from an overall perspective. V is the viability, which means that, how viable is this product? Are people actually willing to pay for it? Is it just a cool device, or is it something that's going to be useful? And feasibility is, are you actually making something that's actually possible to make, or is it like a pipe dream and it's defying the laws of physics? If you come at the continuum of DBF, and this is actually, not a patented thing, you can look it up, it's IDEO's way of managing product development. The DBF framework, if you get it just right on the Venn diagram, you will always hit the nail on the head when you're launching products. Talking about, the device aspects, I'd love to see a show of hands of how many people actually have an Aura ring on them right now. How many have some other ring that's not an Aura ring? Don't be shy. All right, good. All right, not that many, just doing some analysis for you. All right, so at what point, this question's for you, from an Aura perspective, right? When does continuous passive monitoring shift from empowering to actually doing surveillance of your customers? Thoughts from you?
Thank you, Nita. That's a really good question. Everyone, I'm Shi from Aura. Having working at the intersection of wearables and health for the past 10 years, and at Aura I support the cross-functional teams from signal sensing and health-related machine learning and AI development. But back to the question, I think that's a great question. I think eventually it fundamentally comes down to two things: clear benefits and also full user control. If we lose either of those two, we're drifting away from empowering people, empowering individuals. I think the goal of continuous passive monitoring is not just monitoring. I think it's more about helping people to really understand their body and also try to take a more proactive approach to their health in a way it's never possible before. I think that's the key. A lot of people who are in this domain or who want to work in this domain, I think if we do it right, there are a lot of potential of continuous passive monitoring. It will actually help to establish your personal baselines towards multiple different health domains. It can provide a longitudinal and a holistic view and data and memory of your health. And imagine with that personal data and with the help of more advanced intelligence, we can move from just the tracking, monitoring, to actually detection, to earlier detection, to prediction, and eventually to prevention. That's the name of the game at the end of the day. I think our job is to really keep digging out of the value of that data and try to provide it to our members and make sure, and also at the same time be a really good guard on their full control. I think then we're staying empowering our people.
Thank you, Shi. I think you mentioned something that's actually really powerful, and it's the holy grail that we always talk about in healthcare, which is early detection and prevention, right? Instead of actually getting into the state. And I was talking to Girish about it, right, with the Dexcom diabetes, right? How our industries actually interlink is when you have the GLP-1 that's become so successful, that's actually impacted the diabetes market tremendously because you're actually preventing the disease from happening altogether. And so that's really powerful. Cody, I would love to hear from you about, you make a pretty amazing product, and you've actually had a lot of interactions with the FDA. I'd love to get the audience a little more insight into how does FDA think about validating AI products, and what kind of safety measures are you putting into place for some of your AI products that you're launching?
Sure. Yeah, happy to speak to that. And is this working? Yeah. Okay. Good. And my name is Cody Simmons. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dermasensor. We've commercialized the first and only automated party trick skin cancer diagnostic tool. So it used to be a microwave size desktop spectroscopy system, and we miniaturized it to easy to use 1 pound device that from when you pick it up to when you get results takes about 30 seconds. So we're already in use by we think just under 1,000 physicians at around 300 locations, and also dozen health systems. And just signed a couple major partnerships, so we'll be going live with hundreds of sales reps. We've just had our own 3 sales reps selling for the last 2 years, which was our first years.
Can I actually embarrass you and actually can you just talk about what you've actually done recently this morning? Award?
Show us your trophy.
Oh, should go over. Yeah, I think it's in the
Can
back
you
over
please
there.
share that with us as well?
But yeah, in terms of the Tie 50, and also I'm excited to go on the Meet the Drapers show next week. So it was quite an honor. Yeah, to one.
Give it up for Cody and his family.
Our hardware company had to bring home the hardware.
Thank you.
But yeah, I certainly had a lot of interactions with the FDA, more so than I like to reflect on. But we had 5 pre-submission meetings, ultimately completed 6 clinical studies for the first clearance, so it's a class 2 de novo, and even some fun situations like submitted the 10,000 pages for the class 2 de novo. They accepted it for substantive review and said, by the way, I don't think this is what I by the way, We have not yet determined that this is a Class 2 de novo. We'll update you with the deficiency letter, which was in June, whether this is a Class 2 or a Class 3 device. So that was fun. So even up until that, they still hadn't decided what regulatory. So when it comes to kind of validating tools like this, first of all, a large majority of the 1,300 plus AI-enabled FDA-authorized medical devices, the list is over 1,300 now, they updated it. I think it was around 1,250 3 months ago, so it's over 1,300. Are pretty much all assistive or adjunctive. The only autonomous ones I'm aware of are 3 that are cleared for autonomous fundus imaging, so go see an ophthalmologist or not. I think diabetic retinopathy may be winning the also, I'm not sure. And so, that's something I think the FDA is really tiptoeing carefully with. We do plan to speak with them soon about, is there a potential way for autonomous use for skin cancer? We think it'd have to be lesions selected by the clinician, right? The FDA's big concern is, okay, the mole on your arm is fine, and a technician or even a patient at home confirms that with a tool like ours, but you have melanoma on your back and you die because you never watched a radiologist. How do you get around that? We call it the lesion selection problem, right? And so we think if there is potential autonomous use, because we have very compelling data showing not just the algorithm, we're as good as dermatologists, better than primary care doctors, but that actually PCPs using it assistively, remember they're now specialists, that's our focus, is actually net detrimental to the patient. Dermatologists, I think it's probably always going to be assisted. I mean, they're the experts, right? In edge cases and things like that, it should be assisted. But for non-specialists, like by definition, it's not their expertise, it's not their specialty. If you can show like the device is way better, then why is it being assisted? So we do plan to explore that, but in terms of adjunctive tools, which is what I know well, we've taken that through clearance, they really want to see prospective studies, large diverse data sets. We had 22 study centers. Mayo is our big health system, other than that it was all private practices. Over 1,000 patients enrolled. And the key thing is that you lock your algorithm, preferably prior to study start. We did meet with the FDA in the middle of enrollment of the 2-year study and say, hey, we ended up doing, it was like one investigator-initiated study, a couple other sponsored studies. We think we have a significantly better algorithm. The data is still blinded, right? There's no selection bias or overfitting bias. Choosing an algorithm that performs better on the pivotal data set remains blinded. It was something we have to build. But we think we have a significantly better algorithm. Can we change it? So they were open to that. We have to show your QMS system and everything that you aren't somehow choosing an algorithm that you know will perform better on the pivotal data set. So preferably cleanest is locking the algorithm before your big prospective validation study starts. But there is a way typically to change it as long as it's before the study finishes and reads out, right? So that's the key thing in our world. That's validating the algorithm, but because it's adjunctive or assistive, they also really want to understand that it's benefiting the doctor. It's not technically, the more important question could be AI-assisted professional versus un-AI-assisted professional, right? For standard of care, rather than just device first. If it's autonomous use, device first doctor is really most important. But for assisted, you really want to evaluate the doctor using the device versus not using the device. And so for that, in our world, what we did was reader studies. So doctors literally sitting at a computer, so almost like radiologist studies. They get a lesion case that was enrolled in a validation study. They see the case and basically do I think it's likely to be malignant or benign? Would I refer a biopsy it or not? What's my level of confidence? And you can then determine sensitivity, specificity, AROC, and then you show the device output to them on screen and they answer the same questions. So that was kind of the supplemental utility studies. And then there's all kinds of payers like, but that's not how real world care is delivered, so they get upset about those. And, but for FDA, those are sufficient. Radiology has pretty much all this done, is my understanding. And there's certain areas like ours as well, but that's helpful. But in terms of updating the algorithm, they're basically requiring us, because we're first in class, best in class, and algorithms only trained on 2,000 lesions. Our commercial users are already rolling thousands of lesions a month. So we're really excited about upgrading the algorithm. How do you do that? So there's 5 pre-subs leading up to the first clearance. Now we're having a couple about upgrading it. and they're really wanting to see a new prospective validation study. Hopefully, it won't end up being 6 clinical studies, which are a mix of clinical validation studies and reader studies. But they really want to see head-to-head that it's superior, which works out well when you think about it, because you can compare your current algorithm, and what we're doing is like a real-world use study showing the doctor, okay, you identify the lesion as suspicious, how do you plan to manage it? Now use the device, and how are you actually managing it? And that provides helpful clinical utility evidence for payers and medical community. And then we have the locked blinded algorithm to compare head-to-head versus that algorithm. So it's a pretty nice, you're comparing algorithms on the exact same data set. At first, they wanted us to be powered for superiority, but our great lawyer fought back on that, saying, we're going to file a 510K of our new algorithm on the existing algorithms to predicate. You don't have to show superiority for 510K to show non-inferiority. So we basically aligned with them on, okay, the AROC, sensitivity has to be a certain level, an AROC can't be, doesn't have to be statistically superior, but the observed results has to be higher than the current algorithm, if that makes sense.
So we have 1 more minute left. I would love to open it up to see if there's any questions from the audience. Audience, any questions? Yes, sir.
Forgive me, a couple different questions. First of all,
we have only time for one. It's your best one. Sorry.
Okay. All right, I'll try to combine it. Data, data and standards. So the big thing when it comes to data is the omics, genomics, biomics, proteomics. But the good thing is with all the technology, we've been able to sequence the genome and get this type of data much easier than we did 20 years ago. But there's still roadblocks. For example, you want to screen your microbiome, you have to buy $1 million Illumina, equipment. Where do you see hardware innovation going to make this, less expensive in the future? And how will data be filtered? You mentioned personalization. In healthcare, there are different levels. There's the cellular, molecular level. There's the organ level. How do we create standards to filter the data, like you said, wireframes, make the data more personable based, at different levels, cellular level, organ level, system level. People have different priorities based on what disorders they have, and what protocols are relevant here for these types of
Can I
personalization.
pause you for a second?
So.
I think your question will be relevant for the next panel who's about to actually have specifics on devices. This was more on wearables. I can answer your question really quickly to talk about personalized aspect. So, Intuitive makes an ion, which is a biopsy for bronchoscopy. We have a flexible robot. So what we do is we take a CT scan of your lungs, and there's a flexible robot that can actually go in and get a lesion. So that's actually personalized diagnostics to some extent. So I think, the next panel will be very excited to actually help answer some of that question. I'd like to thank my panelists. Thank you so much. And